Thank you.
Love your books, good on your tours. Thank you.
That was a great.
One of my friends, the cookies.
Yeah, okay. Okay, Mary Kay, yeah. Thank you. Oh, you did? Wouldn't that, oh, I'd love to go there. I bet, yeah.
Challenge the truths we were raised to think were self-evident and God-given. His lectures, TV shows, and guidebooks have helped millions of Americans to enjoy maximum travel thrills per mile, minute, and euro, and also to become better citizens of our planet. Tonight, Rick offers broadening your global perspective through travel, sharing how the rest of the world sees our nation, and exploring how his social activism has grown naturally out of his travel experiences. Friends and fellow travelers, help me to welcome Rick Steves.
What a fun thought that the adventurers here needed a guidebook 200 years ago. Well, it's just a thrill for me to be able to travel around the country and share the lessons I've learned from my travels. This is what I do. For the last 30 years, I've spent 4 months a year living out of a 9 by 22 by 14-inch carry-on airplane-sized suitcase. And right from the start, I've been sort of just paying attention and taking careful notes and learning from my experience. And at first, I was a piano teacher, and my students wouldn't practice in the summer, so I decided I'm not going to fight with that. I'll see you in September. I'm going to Europe. And I was on a very tight budget, and learning from my mistakes. And it occurred to me other people are making the same mistakes I made last year. Why couldn't I just organize the lessons I learned and give a talk, and they could learn from my mistakes rather than their own, and have a better trip? So that's what I stumbled onto back when I was a college kid, and I'm doing exactly the same thing now. The difference is right now I've got 100 wonderful people that work with me in Seattle at our company, and we've got technology beyond our wildest dreams to amplify our teaching. So in about 3 weeks I'm heading over to Europe for the first of two-month trips, as I do every year. I spend April and May in the Mediterranean area, and I go home in June and I spend July and August north of the Alps updating my guidebooks. It's just, we're old-fashioned about our guidebooks. We like to visit every place every year in person to make sure the guidebooks are right up to date. And lately I've been spending about 2/3 of my time working on the guidebooks and 1/3 of my time making TV shows. I accidentally scout the scripts while I'm working on the guidebooks, and then I think, well, that'll be good on TV. And the next year I'll go back with my crew and make some shows. And for 20 years we've been bringing a new series home every 2 years for public television, for KUHT. As a matter of fact, I'm going to have to be very prompt tonight because this talk needs to be done at about 7:30, because at 8 o'clock we're on the air live with 6 new shows that'll be airing here in Houston. So if you got nothing else going on tonight and you get inspired from this talk, tonight I believe we're going to be going to the wonderful chateaus outside of Paris, the best of the Italian Riviera, the Cinque Terre, the countryside of the Netherlands. We're going to go to the Veneto, the area outside of Venice, Padua, Ravenna, and Verona, and a couple other shows. So I hope you can go and watch that. And right now what I want to do is share with you the lessons I've learned from traveling. Now, this talk is called Travel as a Political Act. And what I mean by that is, when we get out of our comfort zone and hang out with people who see things differently than us, it challenges us to open our minds and recognize that different people find different truths to be, as Art said, self-evident and God-given. And then I think the beautiful thing is you come home with a broader perspective. To me, that's the most beautiful souvenir, is a broader perspective of the planet, as well as probably more thankful Americans. And I wasn't always into this kind of travel. I've had sort of a 30-year career of teaching travel. I didn't have any great master plan, but when I look back on it, it's been sort of a logical evolution. Back in the 80s, my first book was Europe Through the Back Door. I wrote that in 1980, and throughout the 80s I was just teaching how to travel smartly, how to catch the train, pack light, how to get a hotel and a restaurant, and all that kind of stuff. Europe Through the Back Door, and I give that talk a lot. And that's sort of the bottom rung of Maslow's hierarchy of travel needs. Remember Maslow's hierarchy? So that's your basic stuff. You got your food and shoes, right? And then some roof over your head and heat, and then you can do more interesting and creative and self-actualizing things. So in the 90s, I figured, okay, we've got our basic skills. I really found myself passionate about teaching, appreciating the art and the history and the cuisine and the wine and the culture and all that. I wrote a book called Europe 101, and I was giving all these history and art for travelers talks. That was moving up Maslow's hierarchy. And then since 9/11, I find myself really interested in teaching what I think is the pinnacle of that Maslow's hierarchy of travel needs, how to travel in a way that broadens our perspective. And that's just what I mentioned. And that's this book here, Travel as a Political Act. And that's been the most rewarding travel experience I've had over the last 30 years, is getting out of my comfort zone and going to places where I really am wide-eyed and full of wonder. And it is a great thing. Now, I think that it's more important than ever that we Americans get out there and travel and recognize that we're 4% of this beautiful planet, and there are 96% of humanity outside of our border. And it's just really vital that we get to know them, because it's just important for us to be in the mindset of building bridges instead of building walls, I think, if you're concerned about national security of the place. Now, you know, it's not dangerous. It's not dangerous. 12 million Americans go to Europe every year, and 12 million come home. 30,000 people are killed on our streets every year by guns. That's a real statistic. I'm not saying it's dangerous here, but if you are concerned about your personal safety and you care about your family, you'll take them to Europe tomorrow. Because it's flat out much safer over there than it is here. So when people tell me have a safe trip, I'm inclined to say, you better have a safe stay at home. I've been in Egypt, I've been in Palestine, Turkey, and Russia in the last year. My loved ones might ask me once in a while, do you think that's really wise? Do you think you'll be safe? I say, as long as I'm not flying to Chicago, I think I'll be just fine. It's not that Chicago is dangerous. The point is, these places are no more dangerous than Chicago. And I'd go to Chicago, I was just there this morning, so I would go there tomorrow. You know, it's just not dangerous, it's not scary. So that's kind of my point. I sell tours, that's how we make our money. For 30 years, I've been calming Americans down. We have to get a grip. In the last generation, media has corrupted news. News has morphed into entertainment masquerading as news. If you think about it, when we were younger, when Walter Cronkite said, and that's the way it is, I really believe that's the way it was, to the best of their ability. Because back then, the networks gave the news hour to our society without trying to make a profit. All the networks willingly and knowingly lost money during the news hour. So they just told the news straight. They didn't need to juice it up and sex it up and bloody it up and make it a crisis all the time, right? Well, in the last generation, everything has become privatized, privately held, and if you're running a privately held corporation, you have a legal obligation to profit maximize for your stockholders in the short term. So corporations that own media do not have the luxury of giving us news that's news. They have to turn it into excitement. So more people watch, then they can charge enough to pay for their good-looking anchor people and still have a profit left over from their advertising. If not enough people watch, what do? You stir it up and you make it more hysterical. More people will watch, then you can charge enough for your advertising to make a profit. So I like commercial news. I find it very entertaining, but I don't want to make it to make me a fearful person. And that's the downside of news as entertainment. And if you put it into a 24/7 context, it's crisis all the time, isn't it? I'm selling tours to Rome, and I've got people that think it's dangerous because of ISIS, which is supposed to be a joke. It's not dangerous. It's just ridiculous to think that that would be dangerous, you see. But we've been so titillated by the images on the news that now terrorists cut off people's heads just to have a better impact. And it sure is effective, isn't it? It's just one more guy dead. I don't care if he cut his head off or what. He's just dead. That's a criminal action, and I think it's terrible, but I'm not going to overreact to the hysteria of the news. I find that fear is for people who don't get out very much. The most frightened people are the ones who stay home the most. And the flip side of fear is understanding, and we gain understanding through travel. That's my mission as a travel writer. In fact, since 9/11, I think the role of a travel writer has changed a little bit. I kind of feel like I'm like the medieval jester. Remember well, you don't remember, but you know, in the Middle Ages, the king paid the jester to be annoying. He gave him room and board, and his job was to go out there and learn about the jokes that the peasants were telling in the gutters, and come back into the castle and tell the king what was going on out there. Well, we need to know what's going outside of our borders. I think it's really, really important, and it's fun. So that's kind of the spirit of this. And today we're going to talk about travel as a political act. In this art of conversation and gift of gab, and they just love to talk. I mean, that's entertainment in Ireland. So, you know, I don't care what's on your itinerary. If you meet these two guys and they start talking with you, forget your itinerary. This is what it's all about. I'm talking way on the west coast of Ireland, where they stand on the bluff and they gaze out at the Atlantic and they say, "On the next parish over is Boston." Right? It's that kind of Ireland. And remember, if you want Ireland in the extreme, I would recommend going to little places called Gaeltachts. A Gaeltacht is literally a Gaelic-speaking area. All right, it's a national park for the traditional culture. In Ireland, they actually dedicate money to make national parks for the culture in a way we do for nature. All right, I know it makes no sense economically, and that wouldn't happen here. But in Ireland, they do that. They actually recognize the value of small family farms, and they subsidize that little cottage industry so they can still be there in the next generation, so kids in the big city can go there in the summer and understand from where they came. It's just a different kind of family values, I guess. And as travelers, we can go to these Gaeltachts and find Ireland in the extreme. And when you're a traveler, it's kind of what you're looking for. So it's perfect. They're usually shaded green on the map, and they're out on the west coast. I've got a personal theory about why the people are so interesting to talk to. They speak Gaelic as a first language. In fact, these two guys are talking to each other in Gaelic. The tourist wouldn't know that. The tourist steps up and says, "Hello," and the men turn to the tourist and they speak English without missing a beat, and then you say goodbye and they slip back into their Gaelic. So it's important to remember there's more people speaking the little languages in Europe this generation than last generation. It's on the upswing now. And my theory is, these people think with a Gaelic template, and they speak to us in English, and they translate literally from that template, and it makes a very colorful way of communicating. At least that's my hunch. It's so fun to talk to guys like this. I mean, I was talking to them for a while. I asked the guy on the left, I think I asked him, were you born here? And he paused and he thought, he said, "No, it was about 5 miles down the road." And we got a lot of baggage. Now, of course, that was tragic. It was despicable. But we're a mighty nation of 300 million people, and we're still doing things that we don't believe is really us because of that baggage, because we need to be safe. Okay, that's baggage. But what we need to remember is every other country has baggage too. That's just as legit as our baggage, and we need to cut them slack if we expect them to cut us slack when we do stuff because of our baggage. So I wanted to go to Iran because I was very confused about how 70 million Iranians could elect a guy like Ahmadinejad. I just didn't get it. Because Iran is a pretty well-educated society. Why do these people vote for what seems like a nutcase like Ahmadinejad? So I wanted to go over there and find out, because I knew there must be some explanation. So we went to Iran. I'm really lucky because I work with public television. We can do this stuff on public television without everything falling apart on us. And I was afraid to go to Iran. You know, I just didn't know what it was going to be like to be shooting on the streets with my camera in Tehran. I almost left my big camera in Athens, and we took our little sneak camera in, thinking they'd be throwing stones at us once they saw an American crew on the streets. I got to Iran, and I'll tell you, I've never been received so warmly on the streets as I'm working with my TV show as when I was in Iran. It was very confusing. It was so darn friendly. Now, Tehran's a big city, 12 million people or something like that, and above you, you've got these angry, hateful propaganda posters, 8-story tall American flags made with dropping bombs for stripes and skulls for stars that say, "Down with America." Walking below that, awkward. Just really awkward. But then encountering incredible friendliness and realizing the people you meet on the street weren't even born when this thing was painted up there. You know, so I'm trying to figure it out. I'm in a traffic jam, it's perfectly quiet, we're just stuck in the traffic jam. The man in the next car does this to my driver, roll down your window, he hands over a bouquet of flowers and says, "Give this to the foreigner in your backseat and apologize for our traffic." That's not what I expected when I went to Iran. Now, I don't know about Houston, but in Seattle, that never happens. It's never happened. So they all giggle and they cover their hair properly, and then we're ready for our photo. Well, I had so much fun doing Iran, and it was so, how am I doing for time? I got 15 or 20 minutes, so I'm sorry, this is such a beautiful place to give a talk. I love this building, and I've got just 15 more minutes, so that's good. I was just in the Holy Land, doing the same kind of show, because I just figured, what do I know about Iran? I didn't know much until I went there. What do I know about Palestine? What do you know about Palestine? Not much. You know about Palestine what people know when they look at the TV. What do we know about Iran? We learned from Ted Koppel. That was our teacher for Iran, you know. It's a media circus, and we all swallowed it, hook, line, and sinker. So I wanted to go to Israel and Palestine. Here, the Holy Land, it's interesting. The Jordan River and the Mediterranean. The land between is the Holy Land. There's 12 million people there, 6 million Jews and 6 million Muslims, 2% Christian. Israel is 8 million people, 6 million Jews and 2 million Arab Muslims. Palestine is 4 million people. Most of the people and most of the land in Palestine is the West Bank, not Gaza. Gaza is a complicated issue. I didn't go there, I don't know about Gaza. When I talk about Palestine, I'm thinking the West Bank. And the West Bank, I believe, is beyond violence and recognizes Israel's right to exist, and they just want their own state, okay? Now, it is complicated because it's just a fascinating story. I hope you can watch my show on it. And it's the new chapter. You got the new edition of the Travel as a Political Black book, which has my journal. I should mention that, by the way. The local bookstore has this new edition of Travel as a Political Black, which has my journal on Iran and on the Holy Land, so you can get the details in there if you're curious. But it's interesting to think that Bethlehem, Jesus was born in Bethlehem, and if you were a tourist, you could ride a bicycle where Jesus was born to where he was crucified in 30 minutes. But if you live in Bethlehem, you can't go to Jerusalem, and if you live in Jerusalem, you generally cannot go to Bethlehem. Tourists can, but local people cannot. And their children can't talk to each other. And nearby, just a half-hour drive away in Hebron, is the tomb of Abraham, who is the common ancestor of the Israelis and the Arabs from 1900 BC. Abraham's tomb is cut in half with a pane of bulletproof glass. So Muslims can have a mosque on one side and Jews can have a synagogue on the other side and not kill each other. Because back in the 90s, during a Muslim prayer service, an angry Jewish settler came in and killed, I think, 24 people while they were praying. And there's been killings on both sides. I mean, it's complicated. And it's very poignant. And to go there as an American traveler is just fascinating.